There's all sorts of addictions that we face, whether it's smoking or eating or social media. And these addictions, they can take the form of being physical, like the need for nicotine, or they could be emotional or neurological, like that need for a dopamine hit. And whether or not these addictions come from a physical source or an emotional or neurological need, they all come from the exact same root. And that is something that we can identify and eliminate, and thereby learn how to let go of addictions more easily and more quickly. And today I'm going to show you how. Check this out. Welcome to the Power of Quiet, the simple way to self-realization. So if you want total control of your mind and more happiness and abundance in your life, then you've come to the right place. So if you're new here, make sure to subscribe. You're going to love what we show you, primarily because it is 100% experiential, meaning you don't have to believe me, but you could try what I show you, take it for checking, and prove it to yourself. And if you're a regular here, you love the work that we do, and it makes a big difference in your life, then let us know. Hit the like button below. And if you feel like it, share your gains, share your experiences in the comments below. Or if you have any questions, drop those in the comments and I'll jump in whenever I can and answer those for you. Now, early on this channel, one of the early videos that I did, which was a runaway success, is a video that I did about how I quit smoking in one afternoon. And I just dropped the whole habit completely, like it never happened. And to give you a TLDR version of this, how I did this, basically, I managed to do this early on in my releasing journey. It was shortly after I'd first learned this method that we practice here. And I learned it from my teacher, Larry Crane, who is a student of Lester Levenson, the spiritual master, whose work that we put out here on this channel. And what I learned from Larry, and ultimately from Lester, is that there's 4 ways that we handle our feelings. Number 1 is we suppress our feelings. And I'm talking about our negative feelings: fear, anger, stress, anxiety. So when these feelings come up, we don't like them, and we have a tendency to push them down, like, get out of here. I don't want you here. But when we push our feelings down, we're not getting rid of them. We're actually holding on to them and collecting them. Now, the second way that we handle our feelings is we escape them. We try to run away from them or distract ourselves from them. And we do this from a number of ways. Well, this contributes to a lot of addictions that we have, whether it's smoking or alcohol. These are ways that we typically escape feelings that we don't like. And so basically, when we escape our feelings, they don't go anywhere. Whenever we're done doing whatever escape that we're doing, there are feelings right there waiting for us. So that doesn't work either. And the third way that we handle our feelings is we express them. So we scream, we yell, we have a temper tantrum. So sometimes that could feel like a little bit of a relief, like we let go of something, but not really. Because basically, whenever we express ourselves, we scream, we yell, we cry, afterwards, we generally feel bad about it, or we feel embarrassed, or we make a scene, we feel bad about that. And then afterwards, we just go right back to suppressing. So what that becomes is like a never-ending cycle. It's like a pressure cooker that has a release valve. So it releases some steam until the pressure's relieved enough, but then the valve closes and then it goes back to building up pressure again. So that's not a solution either, by expressing. Now, the fourth way that we handle our feelings, and this is what I had learned, is the simple, natural ability that we all have just to let them go. And if we let them go, then they're gone, and there's no fuss, there's no muss, and we're free. And so realizing this early on, like I said, in my releasing journey, I realized what I was doing with my smoking habit. And up to that point, I'd been smoking for over 15 years, over a pack a day. So it was like a serious habit. And I realized what I was doing. I was using the smoking to push down my feelings. And it's pretty obvious, especially if you're a smoker or if you've ever been a smoker, you know that sensation. It comes regularly. Like for me, it was like every hour on the hour where I just had this feeling of anxiety, like, I got to get out and smoke, right? So I just had this agitation, this anxiety feeling inside of me. And it was me going outside and lighting up a cigarette that it just suppressed that feeling, made it go away for a little while until it came back up again. And so I saw that I'm just suppressing my feelings with this habit. And I just learned this technique, this ability to just let the feelings go. What if I just did that with these feelings instead of running for a cigarette? What if that anxiety, that agitation feeling that comes up, what if I just release it using this tool that I've recently learned? Would that work? And so what I did was I decided one day, that's it. I'm not going to suppress my feelings with a cigarette anymore. When they come up, I'm going to welcome them up. I'm going to open up and just let them go. And I did that. I laid down on a bed, and it took about, if I remember correctly, about like 3 or 4 hours. And it was pretty intense. I sometimes call it like it was an exorcism, because I was on the bed, I was shaking, I was sweating, I had tears and snot and drool coming out, and I just like, just letting all of these intense feelings that I've been holding down for 15 plus years and suppressing them with a smoking habit, just letting them all finally come up and out. And what happened was, like I said, it was intense, but I just kept letting it go, until finally it was like the last bit of it came out, the tail end of it, the caboose, as it were, left, and then it was like nothing left. Afterwards, it was just calm, quiet, and peace that was remaining. And from that moment onward, I didn't have any withdrawal symptoms. I didn't have any aversions to smoking. Again, if you're a smoker or if you've ever been a smoker, you know how if you're trying to quit, that it's hard being around others that smoke. It's like, oh, I can't be around you. I'm quitting right now. But even in those situations, I didn't have any aversion to it. I could be around others that were smoking and it had no effect on me. So it was like I'd never had that habit at all. Like the whole thing completely disappeared. And so I've told this story a number of times, and I've told it about the fact that it was an intense experience that I went through. And I always wondered, well, could it just be easier than that? And that was stirred on by something that Lester Levenson said one time, where he said that as far as going free, like dropping all of your desires, dropping your whole ego, and becoming completely enlightened, for lack of better words, that, see, a lot of us going free, this path to freedom, is a long journey. Whether we do it through meditation or releasing or other means, it's always a journey. It always takes time. But what Lester said was, theoretically, because we are infinite beings, we should be able to just, in one decision, in one simple shot right there, drop the whole thing and just be free. Theoretically, it's possible. We could do it. And he said that he had looked for a one-shot way of just doing it all at once. But barring that, he said that the method that he gave us, the 6 steps that we practice here, that it's basically the next best thing. Sure, it takes time, but of all the different paths or ways to freedom, the 6 steps is the simplest, the easiest, and the fastest way. That's what Lester said, and personally, that's what I found for myself. So, barring doing it all in one shot, the next best thing is just use the 6 steps and just follow this journey, and you'll definitely get there. But it always stuck in my mind. We are unlimited, and what's stopping us from just letting the whole thing go? Without any drama, without having to take time, and just making a simple decision. I'm not listening to my ego anymore. Now, that conversation is about going free, but basically the same thing applies to dropping addictions. Because it brought me back to thinking, well, I dropped a huge addiction, and yes, it was intense, and yes, it took me a little bit of time, but far shorter than any other time that I had attempted to quit smoking. So, obviously, it was a fast and effective way to do it, but what if it could be done even faster? And that's something that I discovered about 2 years ago when I decided to join a gym and start weight training. And when I started at the gym, I was, I guess probably at least 20 pounds overweight. And I was nearly at like 30% body fat. And I had like no muscle tone. Like my triceps were like, floppy wings. And once I started at the gym, I quickly realized that, hey, I could do something with this. And I quickly fell in love with going to the gym and working out. And so early on, I decided, you know what? I'm going to get big. I'm going to drop my weight. I'm going to build a lot of muscle. I'm going to be like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so I just set my mind and set down on that path of bodybuilding. And so I'm looking at, okay, so if I want to increase muscle and drop my weight, what are the simple practical things to do? Well, work out, have more protein, but also reduce my calories. So I drop my fat percentage. Now, up to that point, throughout my whole life, pretty much, and especially in my later years, even during my releasing years, I've had a massive sugar addiction. Like back about 7 years ago, for a period of 6 or 7 years, I used to live in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I remember, especially during that time, the amount of sugar that I ate each day was simply shocking. And I'm just talking about like candy and stuff.
I'm Wilford Brimley, and I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about diabetes.
And even recently, right before I decided to go to the gym and take on this bodybuilding endeavor, I was eating pastries every day. And every day I would go to the corner grocery store. I'd go by the bakery. I'd get donuts. I'd get stroopwafels over here in the Netherlands, and all sorts of sweets and things. And they have great pastries here. So I used to always love indulging in them. But I realized that if I'm going on this bodybuilding journey, eating sugar isn't conducive to going on this journey, right? It's not going to help me. So I need to drop it. And like I said, this was a big addiction of mine for a long, long time, having sugar. But what I realized was when I made the decision that I'm going to drop the sugar, I'm going to focus on bodybuilding, focus on my physique, that it happened so easily and so naturally. It was just like flipping a switch. That one day, from one day to the next, one day where I was going into the grocery store, I was always going by the bakery section, always getting donuts and stuff. The next day, I walked right by, I looked at the donuts, looked at the other pastries, the other sweets, and I had zero urge. It's not like, oh, I had to look away or had to force myself not to do it. I just had zero feeling about it because I made a decision. I'm not doing that. And so I just walked by, I looked at them, and it was just like neutral. I mean, it could have been liverwurst sitting there on the shelf. It was just like, had no appeal to me whatsoever. And it was a demonstration, kind of what Lester is talking about, how you can make a single decision and drop a huge pattern of addiction or a huge ego pattern in one shot. So how does this happen? How can you get to the place where you have this degree of self-control? Well, the simple answer, and probably not the answer that you may be looking for at this time, is it's the totality of doing this work. It is the commitment to the method, to releasing, and making releasing a priority and doing it every single day. You know, bringing up feelings, the negative feelings, and completely letting them go day in and day out. Because the way that this method works, like I said, when you learn this method, you learn that there's 4 ways to handle a feeling: suppressing, escaping, expressing, or releasing. That 4th option, to release, is one that a lot of us, we forgot that we had the ability to do that, to let go. And we do the other 3. But once we practice that we can let go, we see that by releasing, every feeling, every negative feeling that we're fighting with inside of ourselves, again, I'm talking about like fear, anger, anxiety, regret, guilt, all these things that we struggle with, that when we let them go, they're gone permanently. That bit that we let go. Like, so if I let go of 10 grams of anger, then that's 10 grams of anger that's gone. Now, there might be more anger inside of me, but every time I let go of that anger, it's like scooping some dirt out of the barrel. And if I continually scoop it out, eventually the barrel's going to be empty. So as we release, as you practice the simple skills that we practice here, you get lighter and lighter. You get more and more in control of your emotions, of your thinking, and ultimately, you get more and more control over your whole life. And it's the same end that others who practice different paths to spiritual freedom, whether it's meditation or yoga or whatever, they're all looking to achieve the same thing. And ultimately, all of these paths lead to the same destination, basically quieting the mind. I mean, what is meditation about? It's about getting the mind quiet. And other physical things that we do that put us into a meditative state, whether it's yoga or Tai Chi, these activities get us to focus on the body, get us to focus on our breath, so that by just putting all of our attention on this one simple thing that's now in the moment, our mind goes quiet. We're not paying attention to our mind. And so through these practices, basically, they're a way to quiet the mind to the end result of quieting it permanently. Now, what happens when we release? And like I said, this is the value of making it a consistent practice, because every time you release, you let go of a bit of that garbage. And every little bit that you let go of, you get a little bit quieter, and a little bit quieter, a little bit quieter. And so basically what happens is what most people do to achieve a meditative state. By releasing, you just become more and more in that meditative state naturally and permanently all the time. And so it's in that state where you're not having these things pull at you. You're not having your feelings, your emotions, your mind, and your thinking pulling at you all the time, that you're in control and you make the decisions. And so that is, like I said, probably not the answer that you wanted to hear. You wanted something like short and quick, but that is the real answer. But having said that, now I'll give you the short and quick answer so you could start putting into practice what I'm talking about right now and start seeing gains right now to break your habits, your addictions, your automatic behaviors, so that you are legitimately in charge of your life, which is a wonderful experience. All right, so how do we do that? How can we easily get bigger than these urges? And like I said at the very beginning, at the introduction here, these urges can take place in the physical form, like a nicotine addiction, or they could be like an emotional or a neurological sort of addiction, like that we have to social media, where we're looking for some sort of dopamine hit, some sort of thing to trigger our sense of satisfaction. And we all get hooked on all sorts of things. And that puts us in a position where we're no longer in control, when we're running on automatic, being pulled by our feelings, our thoughts, and so on. So how can we break that pull, whether it's physical, emotional, or neurological? Well, the simple way is by discriminating. And let me explain what discrimination is. Now, there's three aspects to the mind. There's a sensing aspect, like it's hot, it's cold. We sense things. And we have that, and animals have that. Now, the second aspect of the mind is the recording and playback aspect. And that's what the mind does. It records things, and it plays it back to us, whether we want to listen to it or not. That sound in our head. And that recording and playback aspect is something that we have and animals have. And when we're operating from the mind, from this aspect, by listening to our mind, this recording and playback mechanism, we have no control. We're being controlled by our mind, by our past thoughts and feelings, and we're letting those run us. And like I said, we have this and animals have this. So an example of this is if you take a baby elephant and you tie a rope around its leg and you stake that rope into the ground so that the elephant can't move, even when it grows up and it's a full adult and it weighs several tons, they still tie the little rope around its leg. They don't even bother tying the other end into the ground. Because that elephant, it has recorded it into its mind that as long as there's a rope around my leg, I can't move. So it doesn't even try once it's an adult. Even though that if it really wanted to, it could just walk off and go wherever it wants. And so this aspect of the mind is the most detrimental to us because it means that we are totally on automatic. Now, the third aspect of our mind is the discriminating aspect. And what I mean by discrimination is being able to see things clearly. Or another alternate word is discernment. It's just seeing the plain truth that's right in front of us, that's completely obvious, if we would just look at it. So, for example, say you're driving down the road and somebody cuts you off, and then they flip you the bird. Now, first, you probably go on automatic. The anger comes up. And before you know it, you see yourself speeding up and chasing after this person. And your intention is, once you catch up to them at the next red light, you're going to roll down your window and you're going to really tell them what you think of them. You're going to tell them what an a-hole they are, and on and on. Right? So you're on automatic. You're being run by your feelings, your anger, and you have a lack of control in that moment. But you pull up next to them, you start to roll down your window, then all of a sudden you realize they're 250 pounds of pure muscle. They're built like a linebacker. And they have some pretty ominous tattoos on their face. And you're like, I don't think I'm going to mess with that person. See, then the discrimination kicks in. Wait, what am I doing? This is not a good idea. I'm going to let this go. And so that is an ability that us humans have that animals don't have, is the ability to discriminate. And this is the powerful tool that we could use right now to just break our addictions. Because basically the addiction is us running on automatic. Our mind tells us, oh, you want this thing. This thing is going to make you happy. And even though if we stop and discriminate, how does that make me happy? How is puffing on a cigarette going to make me happy? How is that chocolate cake going to make me happy? Now, of course, I think it's delicious and, I'm going to enjoy it so much. But after I finish that piece of cake and then have a drink of water, it's all gone. I'm not tasting it anymore. And if that piece of chocolate cake really had the ability to make me happy, then I could just have one piece and then never have to worry about having another piece of chocolate cake again. But we all know it doesn't work that way. Everything that we seek happiness from, usually, like in this case, our addictions, we see that only for a very brief time we seem to have a little bit of happiness or satisfaction in doing this thing. Like with social media. First, we had this automatic need to pick up our phone. A lot of times we don't even realize that we're doing it. We just do it unconsciously. We grab it, and before we know it, we're scrolling through Instagram. And for a moment we feel, I like this. But then after a while it's like, what am I doing? This is boring and there's nothing new here, and I just wasted 2 hours, and now I'm beating myself up, and on and on and on. And then this brings us to something else that Lester also says, is that for every ounce of pleasure that we take from the world, we get pounds of pain. And so, for example, let's just use smoking as a demonstration. So we get a little bit of pleasure for about 5 minutes that it takes to have that cigarette. But the moment that we finish it, we're feeling bad. It's like, I smell, and people look at me funny because I had to go outside and stand in the rain all by myself. I'm such an outcast, and I don't feel good. I have this cough. I can't breathe. And I know that ultimately this isn't good for my health. I'm probably going to get cancer or emphysema or something. And so that little bit of satisfaction, in this case, we could see there's a lot more pain, a lot more grief that ultimately comes down the line from this little bit of joy that we're trying to get externally. And so by discriminating, we can examine what it is that we're doing and ask ourselves, what am I doing? Why am I looking for happiness from this thing, from this smartphone, or from this piece of chocolate cake, or from the cigarette? And how happy is that going to make me? Versus how unhappy am I because I'm stuck in this repeated pattern that I can't break free from. And when we stop and look at it, we see how much more misery and grief we put upon ourselves versus the little morsel of happiness that we're trying to go for. And the more we look at our various habits and addictions, we see we're always chasing after happiness. We're always looking for it and never fully getting it. We're never satisfied. The evidence is we keep having to do it again and again and again and again. So how do we use this discrimination to let go of our habits, to let go of our addictions? Well, an example is a story that I shared earlier about how I stopped smoking. Because, like I said, I realized what I was using the smoking for as a way of pushing down the feelings that were bothering me, the anxiety, the bad feelings that I had about myself, all my regrets, all the things that I just didn't like about myself, all these feelings that came up and just made me feel bad and I wanted to run away from. It was the cigarettes that gave me that tool to suppress them and run away. And it was something that I had to keep on doing because I had to keep on running away. But when I saw that, I had an alternative. I had this tool to just do something else with my feelings rather than suppress or escape from them, that I was going to do that instead. And so that was a demonstration of discrimination. That I'm not going to push my feelings down with cigarettes anymore. I'm going to try this new method that I've learned and see if that makes a difference. And I did it, and it did make a difference. And when I decided to drop my addiction to sugar, again, it came from a discriminating decision. I have this goal. I have this bodybuilding goal, and eating a bunch of sugar isn't going to help in that regard. And what do I need to do that for? And I saw quite clearly that the only reason why I wanted to have a donut is because I thought that eating a donut, it tastes delicious and that makes me happy. But I just stopped and thought, well, how does that make me happy? And how silly is that, and how weak is that to get my happiness from a donut instead of just getting it from being myself? And so that, again, is a discriminating decision. I'm just going to let it go. And that was a decision that once I decided, it was like, so be it. It's done. And it was the rest of the releasing that enabled me to have that clarity to make that decision. But the point is, ultimately, everything in life is a decision. And the more you release, the more you bring this stuff up using this tool that Lester and Larry and Hale, the other releasing teachers that they've given us here, there's less interference in you making that decision. So that decision is just simple and clear and easy to make the more you release. And the more you release, for those of you who are familiar with Lester's method and familiar with the 6 steps, you know that step 6 is basically what I was talking about earlier, that every time you release, you get happier, you get lighter, you get freer, your mind gets quieter. And the more you release, the more happier, lighter, freer, and quieter that you get. It's just a spiral of going upwards every time you release. And you realize that because every time you release, you get happier and lighter, you realize where your happiness really comes from. It cannot come from outside of you. It cannot come from a person. It cannot come from a thing. It cannot come from an experience or a situation. That all of your happiness is right where you are. Right now, right inside of yourself. And that's the only happiness that you could ever feel. And so just going down this path, and like I said at the beginning, right, the long answer that a lot of us don't want to hear, we want the short, fast, somebody do it for me sort of an answer. But it is the dedication, the consistency, the determination, and the practice of making and releasing constant in your life that gets you these gains, gets you happier, lighter, and freer, and realizing that all of your happiness comes from right where you are. And you're feeling it the quieter that your mind gets. And so then this feeds into the discrimination. And so you start to examine all of your motives and everything that you're doing in your life. And you bring it back to, who am I? And where is my happiness? And where is my freedom at? And that sort of discrimination gets you to easily stop chasing after happiness out there and chasing it after things. And this sort of discrimination, this sort of awareness that just becomes natural and inherent to you, allows you to easily just break any addiction. And the more you release, ultimately you get to the point, and Lester says this too, you probably have heard this if you've listened to enough of Lester's talks, where he says basically the way that this works, the way the whole method works, this whole process that we're on here, is that you let go, you let go, you let go, a little bit more, you let more, a little bit more, you just keep letting go. And so every time you let go, like I said before, you let go of a bit of that ego, a bit of that negativity permanently. And so a good analogy for this is like if you're chopping down a tree, right? You chop a little bit on this side, you chop a little bit on this side, a little bit more over here, a little bit more over here, until finally you chopped enough of the tree away that it falls over. And so as you release, you're letting go of a little bit more, you get a little clear, you get a little bit more discrimination, you get a little bit lighter, you get more present. And you eventually get to the point where you really see the rest of your ego, that false part of you, and you see it for what it is. You see that it's just a made-up story. It isn't even real. It isn't true in the slightest. And then you just see the totality of it, and you could just drop the rest of it. Lock, stock, and barrel, once and for all. And then you're free. And that's basically that final decision that Lester was talking about when he said, theoretically, you could just, in one decision, drop the whole veil and be who and what you really are. And again, theoretically, you could do that in one shot and one simple decision, or barring that, do the next best thing. You just use a method, release and release and release enough until you get high enough where you can see all the rest of it, and then you just drop all the rest of it. It's really that simple. And so let's do a little bit of releasing. And I'll show you how you can start getting bigger than your habits, than your addictions, and ultimately get to the place where you can drop whatever addiction that you have. No matter how strong or serious it is, you can just drop it like that. Lock, stock, and barrel. All right, so think about something that you're addicted to, whether it's cigarettes, coffee, or social media, anything. We all have habits. We all do things as escapes. So think about something that you have a habit of doing. And right now, just imagine not doing it ever again. Not even one last time. Just no more from this point on. Just think about that. Think about never doing it again. Think about, as I say, going cold turkey. Now here's the thing. Before, I mentioned that the mind is a recording and playback machine. Right? That's the second aspect of the mind. It records things and it plays them back to you. But in the mind, from the neck up, all it does is it records and plays back to you. It doesn't have an erase button up there. But where you do have an erase button is down here in your stomach or chest area. Right here. This is what we call your feeling center. And this is where you can let this go. This is how I let go when I decided to drop that smoking habit early on in my releasing journey. I just did it right through my stomach and chest. All right, so here's how you do it. So think about dropping this habit right now, cold turkey. Never doing it again. Maybe even deleting your social media accounts and actually deleting the apps and never logging back on ever again. Now, as you think about that, close your eyes and put your head down towards your stomach or chest. This will help you focus on your feeling center here. And just notice when you think about just walking away from this habit, stopping it cold turkey right now. Notice if it brings up a sort of pressure, tension in your stomach or chest, kind of like a clutching, a contracted feeling. Just notice that, like, kind of like a lump in your stomach or chest. You feel that? Do you feel that contraction there? And notice what that is. That is that agitated feeling that you look to do that behavior, that addictive action, in order to satisfy or calm down that feeling. Notice that? But now you have a choice. You could either run away and try to do something artificially to soothe that feeling just momentarily, or you can discover another way right now to just let it go and not have to be bothered by it ever again. Now I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So right now, wherever you feel that contraction, that tightness in your stomach or chest, just open up an imaginary window or door right in front of that feeling. And see that feeling as just energy that's coming up. And what we're going to do is we're just going to come from the premise that that energy, that feeling, it wants to leave. That's why it's coming up. It's coming up to leave, but we don't like it, so we push it down. We try to suppress it. But instead of suppressing it now, what I want you to do is open up that imaginary window or door right in front of that feeling, right in front of that energy. Just open up an imaginary window or door right in front of it. And imagine that energy, that feeling, just going right on out the door right now. Just open up and let that feeling leave. Just watch it leave. And you could use your imagination. There's no right or wrong way to do this. You could visualize it as smoke going out the door or water pouring out, whatever. Just let that energy go out the door now. And a little bit more. And some more. And even more. And even more. And even more. It's just energy. There's no need to examine it. Who cares where it came from? What it means? It's just energy and it wants to leave. Just open up and let it leave. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just energy passing through. So just let that energy pass through a little bit more. And a little bit more. And even more. And even more. And let it go a little bit more. And even more. And a little bit more. And notice how you feel. Just notice if you feel a little bit lighter. That's all we're looking for. It's just a lighter feeling. Notice the difference? And again, when you think about not doing this thing, this habit, whatever it is, if you think about just dropping it and never doing it again, see if you're as bothered now as you were a few moments ago. Or do you feel a little bit lighter, more in charge, and more okay? Like, oh, yeah, I don't need to do that. Notice the difference? See if you're less agitated as you were a moment before. And that right there is proof that you can let go of these feelings. And it's these feelings that drive us and keep us on automatic. And when we're on automatic, we don't know what we're doing. We've got no discrimination. We've got no clarity. We're just reactive. And we're doing whatever this mind, this voice in our head tells us to do. But all it is just a sound that we recorded in. We put it in there in the first place, and now we're listening to it, letting it boss us around, to have us do these destructive habits, to have us waste time and hold on to this negativity. But once we start discriminating, we could very quickly realize, hey, I don't need to be doing this anymore. I know where my happiness is. I've proven that to myself, and I'm going to go for that. From now on, I'm not going to waste time with this other stuff. And that, ultimately, is how we can go all the way and be free, like all these great ones that we've listened to and that we've heard of. So this is a wake-up call to stop giving your power away to your urges, to your feelings, to your mind, and realize who's really in charge, to realize who you are. Because after all, when you have feelings and urges that pull on you, right, they're feelings. Who's feeling these feelings? Who's aware of these feelings? And when that voice in your head starts talking to you, saying, oh, you want that chocolate cake? You know you do. You can't walk away from it. You're going to be thinking about it for the next 2 hours. You better just eat it right now. When that voice is talking to you, who's it talking to? Who's listening to it? See, most of the time, unfortunately, we're identifying with that voice in our head. We think that that's us. And we think those feelings that we have, that they're natural. And we're supposed to have these feelings. But rarely do we stop and examine who is it who's experiencing these feelings, who's aware of them. And that voice, that sound in my head that I'm listening to, who's listening to that? Who's it talking to? And so we typically never examine that because to the mind, there's nothing there. That awareness that's aware of the mind, the thoughts, the feelings, that has no face, has no name, it has no beginning, has no end. It just is. And to the mind, it just seems like there's nothing there, so there's nothing of interest. But that is where everything is at. And so if you want to discover that for yourself, who you really are, and where all of your happiness and all your satisfaction and all of your power really lies, that's where it's at. And if you want to discover this in a big way, I invite you to join me for a new 6-week course starting here in September called the Body Mastery Course. Because unfortunately, most of us were identified with this body. We're so identified with it that whenever the body has pains, when it's sick, we're suffering from that. And every day, we're always worried about something that could end this body. And so we're always fighting for survival and worried about that one inevitable day that this body is going to be no more. And so that shows us how identified and how miserable this body is making us. We're fearing it every single day. And it's time to get bigger than this and realize that once we come from the position where we know who we are and that we are not subject to the body, but we, in our infinite beingness, created this thing, then we could very easily change that body. So if we have any imperfections, any illnesses, any injuries, we could change those. We could heal those very easily and quickly, knowing who we are. So I invite you to join me on this Body Mastery course because it is an ultimate lesson in the truth of yourself. And by realizing that, all of your body problems, all of your limitations in the body go away, and you can do amazing things. So if you're ready to prove that to yourself, then join us. I'll put a link to it up here, also in the description below for this new 6-week course. And it'll also give you that momentum to make releasing a constant practice so that from this 6 weeks forward, you can make it a prominent thing in your life that you use every single day, where you just go higher and higher and higher until ultimately you reach that ultimate consciousness that you've been looking for. You can get that quicker than you realize. So join us and discover that for yourself. All right, so keep releasing, and I'll see you soon.